Cool. Here we are.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dan Liebenston, and I'm here with Yonatan Shadmi, and this is episode 3 of Stone News. And just before we came on, we were talking a little bit about what that name meant. Yonatan, you want to tell our watchers what you were telling me?
Yeah, sure. So hello, whoever's watching. I hope you had a good seder. So Stone News is a song that it's covered by Tom Waits, but it was originally written by a sort of more obscure guy. And it's about the Torah. It's called Books of Moses, the song. And it's like a very personal take on what the Torah is, basically. And what I like about it, one of the things that I like about it, is that it's so, like the Torah and the Bible in general, as far as mythology goes, they are so simple. Like we don't have flying dragons, we don't have elephants, we don't have like battles in the sky. Instead, the Torah is such a down-to-earth thing. It's such like there's a shepherd and he's sitting on a hill and he throws the rocks at the other shepherd, and that's the big story. Like this is where it ends. And I was saying that in a way, it reminds me of some of the stuff that I like about Israel, with live from my bedroom in Israel. This was made by my late grandmother, by the way, Zichrona lebracha, in blessed memory. So in Israel, everything is so small. I sometimes like people who come here with expectations are really disappointed, because if you're in the US, this has happened I think with a lot of Christian travelers in the US, and you read about the Jordan River, then you have a certain idea of what a river is. But when you come here and you see that the Jordan River it's a trickle, it's something that wouldn't even be on a map if it was in Ohio or someplace like that. Everything here is so small, it's so down to earth, it's so unmythological in a way. And I think it's a really cool thing. So, and Stone News, it's like, that's what the Torah is. The Torah, it's like news. It's one tribe took over the other. It's like a news bulletin. It's like, it's anti-mythology as mythology, basically.
By the way, just the simplicity of what you're talking about reminds me of when my son, many years ago, we went to visit this large church just to see how it was a famous large church, and we were interested in how they operated. And so my wife and I and my son, who was maybe about 3 at the time, went to see this church, and there was a big childcare center in the bottom of the church, and we dropped our son off there, and we went to the service, and it was really a pretty incredible experience in the service. And then when we picked our son up at the end, we said, how is it in the childcare? And he said, oh, it was really good. And we said, well, what did you do there? And he said, oh, well, I learned about a shepherd, and he has a flock of sheep, and maybe sometimes the sheep falls down, and then the shepherd comes and he picks him up and he helps him get up again. And that's okay. The sheep doesn't have to feel bad that the shepherd had to help him. And I was like, oh my gosh, they've completely taught him the entire religion in one morning. And we can't do it in, years and years of Jewish education, and I don't know if that's because we're not good at education, or somehow we're not willing to make it simple or simplify. So anyway.
Yeah, I think there's something, people are always saying that the Torah is so different from everything that came after it. So different from the Talmud, so different from, I think, most Jewish texts, because it's so raw. Like you said, it's like a simple story. There's the shepherd, there's the flock. And I think that's actually a pretty cool way to go into how's our life right now. So how was the Seder? This is one day after the Seder. How was the Seder at your house?
Well, we still have another one here in the diaspora. So we had the first Seder. So it's interesting. I think I mentioned this maybe last week. We're sort of co-quarantining with another family. So we're both separately quarantined, but because we're completely quarantined, we're able to go to each other's house, and we usually do that for Passover anyway. So in many ways, like, my Seder wasn't too different from previous years. Because it usually is just these two families. So last night it was at their house. Tonight it's going to be in my house, and I always try to do it differently, but I'm not doing it differently so much. Well, that's not true. I think that we will hopefully have conversation that's more oriented towards where we are. the last night was a more traditional one that we do at their house. And
It's
tonight also, I
important to
think that
them to
we
have
have
it.
various family members that are coming in by Zoom.
Oh, last night or
No,
tonight?
tonight. I think tonight that's going to happen.
And you got any special content lined up, or?
Well, I have content that could have been true for any Passover. The truth is, it's not going to be as great for the people coming in on Zoom. That was sort of a last minute thing that
Yeah.
I knew that anybody was going to be on Zoom. But basically, I ordered these Haggadahs that are from actually an artist collective in Israel called Asufa. And
Okay, cool.
it's a group of artists, or I'm not sure exactly what it is, a gallery. And each year they produce a new Haggadah where an artist draws one page of the Haggadah based on one of the parts of the Seder, and every year it's completely different. And I'm thinking that the way that I wanted to try to get at things this year was to have everybody having a different piece of art in front of them, interpreting the same piece of the Haggadah, and
you're
that
going to
might
talk
provoke
about it? You
conversation.
think
Yeah,
you can get the conversation going?
I hope so. I think so.
Like that, it is your job. I'm just
Right,
saying.
right.
That's your day job.
Right. I mean, every year I do it differently, sometimes to the annoyance of my family. So that's why often it's like, it's good that we have one traditional Seder for the people who
Yeah.
feel they want to have that, and then one non-traditional that I lead. And, in previous years, I've tried to connect the story of the Exodus with the story of the African-American slavery in the United States, which is an obvious connection because they themselves made it. But but I've actually taken it further than the slavery experience. I've also, wanted to look at the African American experience after slavery, and kind of thinking about that and the way that that's reflected upon by African Americans differently from how, at least in our liturgy, we reflect on it. Things like that. So last year I did it without a Haggadah, which I actually thought was really good, but it was given some negative feedback. No.
But from your kids, who's giving the negative feedback?
Yeah, my kids. I mean, I think everybody thought it was a little weird, but my point was that it was actually a return to the tradition, because the tradition was not to have a Haggadah, because people couldn't have afforded to have a Haggadah.
Yeah.
So
they didn't have books.
Right. So
okay.
The truth is that, and we could talk about this later if you want. I think the whole Seder is a flawed construction. Like, I think in theory it's a good idea, but I actually think it doesn't work very well to accomplish what my understanding is that it's supposed to accomplish.
Okay. So yeah, I'd love to go into that. Let me just tell you how it went here. I think there are two interesting points. First of all, to be honest, it was like one of the best Seders that we had, and it has to do with the fact that when we do it with the rest of the family, it's like it becomes just a family gathering, basically, I think. With all the stuff that comes with that, and you do the Haggadah, and usually the children don't have necessarily the patience. And here it was me, my wife, and our two daughters, and I think there were two things that were good. Like we were really, because it's just two kids, and you can kind of focus on them. And one of the good things about Passover is that it's very clearly, like even according to the Rambam and these guys, very clearly focused on your kids. Then there's something freeing about it. We talked about it last time, that some of the best stuff happens when you're not trying to make stuff happen for yourself. Like if you want to build a community, don't try to build a community, do something else that's important, and a community will come up.
Right.
If you want to have like a meaningful Seder, try to think what would be meaningful, like in my case, for like a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I think one of the things that they liked best is actually the stuff that they didn't understand, like the Aramaic stuff, and saying like halachmania, words that they don't understand. It seems to, and I also enjoyed that part. I felt like I'm transmitting something that I myself don't understand. It's like a black box that I'm taking. Look, I don't know what it is. It's probably going to get pretty deep into your psyche, because that's how it works. So just take this black box, and I hope it's going to be useful for you. That was one thing that was good. And the absolute best thing was Eliyahu. I don't know if you have it in the US where someone dresses up as Eliyahu and comes in.
Oh, I mean, sometimes, but usually not. Usually we just open the door and nobody comes in, and usually somehow the wine disappears, so the kids maybe think somebody came in.
Yeah, someone takes care of the wine. That's good to know.
Right, right.
So here I was saying that I'm going to the bathroom, and I went out and I changed. I had like a sort of a Bedouin style shul, like a white robe,
Uh-huh.
and a fedora and like a Panama hat, and my wife made like this fake beard. And I was pretty drunk at that point. I don't know when you're supposed to have Eliyahu, but I made it at a point where after I was drunk, and I went around the back and I knocked on the door, and I went in, and they absolutely lost it. The girls absolutely lost it. They started running around me in circles, screaming. And I went in and I drank and I danced a little bit, and I got out. And then I got back from the bathroom, got back to my clothes, and they came to me, and I'm telling you, I don't think I've ever seen them. They were astonished. I mean, to a point that I think that I may have overdone it. They were a little bit frightened. And they kind of told me about this guy who came in, and like my 2-year-old, she doesn't really know how to talk, but she says, big beard, big beard.
Wow.
And it felt, and then this morning, the first thing that they say, what about Eliyahu? Where is he? Did he go home? So I hope for them, but for me, like I really went, partially because I was drunk, I went into the character, and I kind of imagined myself, because of the beard, like kind of a ZZ Top character. Like, and when I danced, and what the good thing was, like, it's a paradox. That good stuff happens when you don't focus on yourself. But again, it helps that I was drunk. I can hear them shouting outside.
They're still talking about it.
I didn't, it wasn't about them at some point. I just danced as this kind of guy that I was imagining to be. And the whole thing was 2 minutes, right? But that's definitely what I remember from this Seder.
Huh. That's cool. It's interesting because that, first of all, that's very cool that you're in the moment. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about, like, is the Eliyahu part intentionally placed where people are likely to be drunk, because it is at the end, you know, after 4 cups of wine, I think, or at least 3. So that's good. It's interesting because it made me want to ask you, like, how have you talked to your daughters who are so young about why, you know, it's only our family? Because in our group, we had a very different experience of the Eliyahu part, which was that it was a little bit of a, you know, sick joke, you know, like when we went to open it, we said, like, hope he doesn't come this year, you know, because maybe he's infected, you know, because he never died. That's the whole point of Eliyahu, is that he was carried off in a chariot and he never died. That's why he's available to come back to visit us. And so therefore he would be subject to COVID, you know, and so if anybody shows up at the door, you know, close it.
Well, I think your kids are older, right?
Right. Yes.
That actually seems kind of appropriate to me. Like, okay, to take it to a darker place. Like, you're ready for that.
Right.
In terms of how did we explain it, because they're so young, they don't know what's right. They don't know that you're supposed to meet with all your family on that day.
Right.
We didn't really have to. But again, because we were alone, when we were with my family, like, I don't necessarily, like, I went the extra miles to be celebrative, to be, I really dressed like to the nines, and which I never do. And I did the Eliyahu part and all that. So that was good. And like, in context of some of the things that you talk about, this combination of like the traditional stuff and the progressive stuff, with the way that I handle it is that everything that is traditional that I can bear to keep, I'll keep. Again, this black box thing, take this black box, put it forward. And then the other stuff, I didn't really pre-plan for. I really believe in intuition when creating something new. And it kind of worked, I think, although, you know, maybe 10 years from now, they'll tell their psychologist about this horrible night where this frightening stranger came in and danced on their carpet. Hopefully
it's like there's a Christmas song about, you know, that I saw my mother kissing Santa Claus, you know,
Yeah.
because, you know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Something like that. Exactly. And by the way, like Eliyahu is like at least in some renditions, our rendition is kind of a Santa character
Right.
with the beard, and they have the afikoman and the gift and all that.
I mean, so one thing
yeah.
I just wanted to sort of mention about the Seder is that, you know, I think it's been interesting to me to reflect on this whole experience that I'm having with the coronavirus situation, because in some ways my life was already very physically distanced,
Yep.
in the sense that I work at home. Most of my job has been online. You know, I do interact with a lot of people, but mostly on Zoom before this. So in many ways, my life on a day-to-day basis hasn't changed so much. What's different is now my whole family is home, and they're you know, they're going through various elements of it. They're mostly okay, but you know, like they're experiencing it as a change, whereas for me it's not really much of a change.
Yeah.
For me, what's the most difficult thing is just the tragedy of it all. You know, not the social physical distancing part, but just like coming up at the end of the day and turning on the news. And it was also always depressing to me at the end of the day to turn on the news anyway, you know, but now it's even more depressing, and it's the same depressing every day, meaning, you know, it's all COVID all the time. It used to be all Trump all the time, which was bad in its own way, you know, and now that it's like, you know, it's like that story of the person who says his house is too full, and the rabbi tells him to bring in another animal and another animal, another animal, and then when he gets them out, you know, it's a relief, you know, but it's still, I don't know, somehow I feel like we've just replaced one, you know, elephant with another elephant. So, but you know, my experience is just the same experience that I've been having also during the whole Trump administration, which is just, it's just like one scandal, one thing, one difficult, one problem after another. So this is even more tragic, you know, and people are dying. And so that part is difficult emotionally. But then when we come to Passover, what's interesting is that, you know, I kind of feel like there are these like three different elements of the Seder. And I think in America and Israel, I think for most people, the most dominant part of the Seder is what I call the Thanksgiving element of the Seder, meaning that it's just a time for family to get together. And
like we said.
Right, and that's why I think so many people are experiencing such a tremendous loss this year, because the one thing that basically Passover is about for them isn't available. It's the same thing if we were having this during Thanksgiving in America, people would be going, like they wouldn't know what to do, because there is no Thanksgiving without getting together with family. You know,
and what do you think about the relief effect? The fact that people don't want to spend time with their families. Many people.
Well,
I mean, don't want to, not in the sense that they don't love them, but the fact that you're suddenly free.
Right. Interesting. Right.
I think that's one of the things that's there. But I want to sort of use that as a sort of a segue to the next thing that we want to talk about, which is, speaking of Corona news and speaking of sort of the hustle and bustle and the usual stuff that just stops, it was published, I think, in the Atlantic this week, some of the Earth scale of Corona, of COVID, that first of all, the ground beneath us rumbles less because there are less trains, less cars, even less humans walking around. And the ocean is as quiet as it's ever been since they've started to measure it with modern tools. And I think like, and again, like Thanksgiving, and there's no, you're not going to your families, there's not all this mess. And then like for modern people, this may sound good actually, because I think a lot of us are saying, look, I really need more quiet in my life. But one of the things that we're finding out is that it's also, I think, our biggest fear. We're really afraid of stillness. We're really afraid of being quiet. And it's like 30 to 40% less. The world is 30 to 40% less rumbly than it used to be. And I think in terms of ocean noises, it's even more. But the quiet outside doesn't seem to translate to the internal quiet. And I gotta say, like in my personal life, I've had like for the last 2 years, I hired, like, it's a great privilege. I hired like renovated a garage in Bnei Brak. And my thinking was that I have like a great team running my company, and I thought, okay, I'll go there and I'll finally have some quiet and peace in my life. And then I don't know if I thought about it that much, I'll be happy. But that's not really what happened. Like instead, it was as if like I released some kind of internal demon that was distracted the whole time. And I think this is something that's going on right now to a certain extent with the world.
You mean that the quiet of the world is releasing the demons in many individuals, you're saying, right? That not that there's something happening on a global scale that's demonic, that's bad. You're just saying that people are struggling to deal with the quiet world.
I'm saying that the proper response to stillness on a spiritual journey, and for this discussion, I'm talking about the spiritual state of the world. The proper response to stillness is actually discomfort. Because stillness and quiet, and there's a lot of sort of literature on that, some of it thousands of years old. Stillness and quiet basically allows us to feel our limitations and to feel sort of our borders. And I think what's happening now on a global scale is that we're feeling that discomfort, and there's an opportunity there, I think.
What is the opportunity for? Like, what do you think is the opportunity?
To feel this discomfort, to feel this discomfort, and to not like say, oh, well, I don't want to say what's not, but to feel this discomfort, this discomfort, and to be with that discomfort, and to allow it to manifest itself. Now, again, spiritually, what this requires, like I wouldn't recommend it to everyone necessarily. You need to have an internal sort of responsible adult that is allowed for this discomfort, but also kinds of doesn't allow you to identify with that discomfort. You are not that discomfort. You are something else. And when you have that character, that some say it's one of the aspects of God, which is inside you and it's just looking. It's just looking all the time. And then you can feel like really pretty radical stuff and not be destroyed by it. And feel what COVID is doing. And before that, like you said, what Trump is doing. And not sort of, not repress it, but also not try to explain it away and not try to do something immediately about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, like it's funny because it's like I think that I hear what you're saying, and I mean I think it's right for many people, and for whatever reason, like I'm not going through that. Like for me, like maybe that goes back to what I said earlier, that like for me it doesn't feel like the world is quieter for me because I'm doing the same thing I'm always doing. I'm not traveling as much, and which actually I'm experiencing as a relief, which is interesting because I thought that I like traveling. But I don't know, like maybe this is about my psychology. Like I'm just filling the time with more work, I'm not filling the time with quiet, which may be something worth pondering.
Well, yeah, I think it's worth to just notice this stuff. Notice that you're working more, right? You're not working less.
Right, much more.
And like I hesitate to. I think you're. I don't know if that's exactly the word, but you're rather happy, aren't you? Like compared to what was before the pandemic.
I mean, yeah, I'm happy in the sense that I have a project that's keeping me busy and feeling like I'm helping people and feeling energized by the newness of it, and that things have to be done. So in a way, I think it sounds perverse to be happy. I think the reason I'm happy is because I found a way to distract myself from the pain that it could have otherwise been filled with. I mean, like if I wasn't doing this, like normally my life is travel and speaking and, whatever. And, the podcast takes up some portion of my week, but not a huge portion. And so there's a lot of sitting and a lot of,
a lot of sitting.
a lot of sitting in the sense of, go work on this email, go, arrange this
Sure.
trip, whatever it is. And I have a lot of opportunity to turn on the TV or listen to the radio and to sort of hear the news. And so in a sense, I'm more occupied with the news in my previous life than I am now. Because now I've launched this new project as a response to what's going on, or partially as a response to what's going on. And it's so all consuming that I'm only able to really hear the news at the end of the day. And so then so that what I'm saying is I have this sort of whipsaw experience where during the day I'm energized and working nonstop, and in the evening I'm depressed and sad, but it's
I
not
see.
quiet. It's almost like, I have an hour to be depressed, and then, it's time for bed, kind of thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and
Sure.
so, but I mean, so the question is like, what if I hadn't started this project during this time? I think that my experience would be that I would have even more time, because now I'm not traveling.
Yeah.
So I would spend more time watching the news all day, and more time kind of talking to family and friends who are feeling bad,
Yeah.
actively, right? And then I would, and then the question would be, would I find a way to fill that experience with some quiet? Like, then I would say, like, then I would want to talk to you, Yoni, and say, what can I do that will at least give me a little bit of an opportunity to make some, to sit, in a quieter way, and instead what I've done is I've filled that time with something extremely active. And so my question is, right, am I doing that as a defense mechanism, right, where instead of feeling and thinking, I'm working? That would be a classic way to defend oneself from the need to go internal.
Well, I mean, you certainly seem to describe it that way. You certainly seem to describe it that way. And I think it actually puts you in a pretty good position, because you do have energies, you do have good stuff that's happening during the day. You do have what to work with. So the question would be, what if you did allow for some of this discomforting quiet to take a bigger like part of your day? And the way to do it, usually, all that stuff, you do it with breathing. Which reminds me, let's do it right now. Just, I need you. Yeah, it's frightening. It's frightening to stop. It's scary to stop. I mean, it's scary for me, and I think it's scary for a lot of us. But so this is why, like, I want to say on my own sort of spiritual journey, I consider myself very much a novice, like a beginner. And I put, like, I think the last 6 months, just sort of putting my internal house in order, or trying, or no, not trying, but like I'm in a stage there, just to be able to begin. And putting your house in order in that respect, there's a lot of stuff that you need to do just to be able to experience the world. There's a lot of work. And where that takes you, like in my good moments, is that it's like a well-oiled, not exactly machine, but it's like there are small, like 5 or 6 different voices inside of me. And you never want to identify with any of these voices too much, but you want to let them have their say. And when the system is working right, then the different voices like have their place. And like what we want to develop is, we can use that metaphor, like an internal CEO. A good CEO, a good executive, doesn't do much necessarily. He goes to engineering and he hears them out. And engineering tells him, look, we got to build that bridge. It's a great opportunity. We'll use all of our skills there. It's a great thing. And then he goes to marketing, and marketing tells him, look, we don't know if the bridge really works with our current marketing plan. And then he goes to sales, and sales tell him, look, we can sell that bridge, but we're not going to make any money. So you want to have those different voices, and then you really don't want to jump into any conclusion. You don't want to say, okay, engineering is right or marketing is right. And just that simple thing, again, it took me 6 months. I'm still working on it, and we're supposed to work on it, I guess, until we die. And then what I found when that works, by the way, in the commercial world as well as the personal world, then the right thing to do kind of presents itself, because it's never a textbook answer. It's never, well, we should all take 10 minutes a day and breathe. I mean, that's always good. But it's always something that is really personal and idiosyncratic. Like, what should Dan Libenson do right now? There's something in you that knows. I mean, that has been my experience. But it's really hard and non-trivial to let that voice come out.
Yeah.
So that actually takes us to our next, to the next thing that we want to debate, or I don't know, talk about,
right.
Which is that we are living through an apocalypse, like theoretically, or maybe the world is being destroyed. Certainly, like the old systems of capitalism and democracy, they don't look good right now. They really don't look good. So we can begin by asking, first of all, do we need a Yavne for democracy? Is democracy at the point where Judaism, is democracy crashing, basically? I think it's certainly crashing for a lot of people. So the first question is, can we acknowledge that? And the second question, which I think is particularly scary for progressives, can we think beyond democracy? As I say it out loud, can you say that? Can you say in our system that, wait, maybe democracy isn't the be all and end all?
I mean, you know, it's sort of so inconceivable to somebody who's grown up in the United States and to somebody who's kind of grown up, I think, in the Western world. I mean, I think we've kind of internalized, I think it was Churchill's idea that democracy is the worst political system ever invented, except for all the others. So on the one hand, I say, on the one hand, clearly it's not working in the sense that it's not working well. The question whether it's working better than anything else would work. And I guess the question is, how do you even start to think about that? A question as radical as that.
So to connect it to what we just talked about, I think the way to go is to allow those internal and external voices to have their say without being destroyed by them, but also without acting on them. Just delaying the acting on them as much as we can. And have that internal CEO say, well, yeah, I'm opening this meeting. By the way, I don't know if you can hear it, but my girl is shouting outside.
I hear, yeah.
And it's, I think it's like, she asked for the afikoman, she asked for chocolate, which was great. I said, okay, good. She doesn't want nothing too, too tangible.
But now she's had too much.
This is a demonstration of what's going on now, because I'm being distracted by this, obviously. And like the thing that came to my mind was, well, here we have the man talking about these great ideas, and the woman, the mother, my wife, is taking care of the kids and doing that labor. And what you want to do is to be able to say, well, maybe that's right. Certainly something to think about. Maybe afterwards, take her out, take my daughter out somewhere and give my wife some release. But also saying, okay, I'm in control here. I'm the CEO here. I'm giving this the sort of listening that I wanted to give it, and now I can sort of move on. So I don't think, so we're on sort of touchy territory here, right? But I do think it has become, especially on the left, sort of harder and harder to say things without being automatically identified with them. And that, I think, makes us, there's a lot of problems, but it makes us less effective. If you look on the fringes of the right, there are tons of crazy ideas, of crazy ideas, most of them dangerous, and God forbids that they'll get actually happen. But we don't have that. We don't have that, again, that internal CEO that says, yeah, okay, say something wild, and it's okay to say something wild.
Right. I mean, that's why it's become so central to my thinking about what we're doing here on Jewish Life now, what we've been doing on Judaism Unbound. When we touch a controversial topic, often that's actually Israel. I feel people should be allowed to say what they want to say, and people, I think, get afraid, just like you were saying earlier, that if we say it, it means we might do it, and if we can't imagine, if it's inconceivable to do it, then we shouldn't say it, and that we shouldn't even tolerate someone else saying it. And that just, I agree, that's not right. That doesn't sound right. And it doesn't sound very traditionally Jewish either, like it doesn't seem like that's the Jewish way. I shouldn't say that, because there's always a dialectic, and there's certainly been a Jewish tradition of suppressing voices, and there's been a Jewish tradition of opening up to voices. So I guess I should say I prefer the tradition of maximum openness to different voices. So on the subject of democracy, though, I mean, just to so having established that when we're talking, we're only talking, and we're not, we're just surfacing thought. Like, what when we say, is democracy crashing, and like, if you say democracy is crashing, I think most people's impulse who are Western democracy lovers, is to say, okay, well then we should fix it, as opposed to we should replace it with something else that would work better. And I guess my question is, like, what could be better than democracy?
So let's take it to where we're comfortable. Let's take it to Judaism. What could be better than Orthodox Judaism? I think the answer is that we don't really know, but we want to be unbound. We want to be unbound, and we want to, like, democracy unbound. That's sort of what we need. And that requires an ability to listen, and an ability to experiment, And I actually think that we're seeing it happen around us. What Trump is doing is exactly that. Right. I mean, I don't think he's very cerebral about it necessarily, but he's breaking all the rules.
Right.
And by the way, there's something attractive and sort of sellable just about that fact: a person who breaks the rules. And I think it's certainly true in Israel that the left was kind of identified itself with the state of Israel and with the state apparatus even. And then we became sort of, again, it's a feeling that is now familiar in the US, just you're continuously mortified. You're continuously mortified rather than, okay, there's something going on in the world. And let's be honest, even after all those really horrible things that happened in Israel, for us, the progressive left, we still have our privileges. We still have, like, our education. We still have our money. We still have some sort of free speech. And that gives us a lot. There's a lot that we can do with that at that stage. I'd love to see, like, more American or Israeli and more sort of places that are unbound, that are saying, yeah, we're thinking out loud here. We're experiencing crazy stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't disagree. I because it would help me even start to think about this question, to have a starting point, which I feel like I don't really have. I'm trying to think, like, why do I not feel this anxiety about Judaism? I would say that, by the way, well, I would say two things. One is that that I when people have asked me sort of to reflect on what I do with Judaism Unbound, and the way that we've been advocating a kind of openness to and an invitation to what we call regular Jews, just plain old people, to take a more active role in experimenting and recreating, and I've said, like, it worries me a little bit that when I talk about Judaism that way, that's kind of how Trump is talking about America. And like a sort of a populism, and I'm trying to figure out how to make a distinction between what I'm saying about Judaism and what Trump is saying about America. So on the one hand, I do have that anxiety, and I have had that anxiety for a long time. And the other question is, the other sort of way that I reflect on it is that I think that my anxiety about what's happening to America and to the world, the Western world, is it's given me a lot more empathy to the way that more Orthodox Jews might respond to me, you know, in the sense that, or or even if it's not to me, but to the situation that I'm embracing, you know, that I'm happy about, that I'm excited about, is anxiety producing, and it does feel to me like my experience with America and with democracy is a little bit like the realization that, you know, God is dead, or God is never was, you know, because number one, and I've said this before on Judaism Unbound, like number one is that the system that I was taught was more robust. You know, the system I was taught was so robust, turns out to be much less robust than I was taught that it was, apparently. We'll see, I guess. But and the other thing is that you know, that I'm trying to figure out how to put into words, but that I think that it's the lack of alarm by African Americans that really struck me. Meaning, what I mean by that is that many African Americans responded to Trump by saying, yeah, he's terrible, but I mean, it's always been terrible for us. You know, like, is Trump really so different from, you know, George W. Bush? I mean, even Obama, ironically, right? I mean, they say like, this is just not, it's not even who's the president. It doesn't matter. This whole system is rigged against us. And it doesn't even matter if one of our own is the president, it's rigged against us. So Trump, he's a little worse. He's a little more embarrassing, but you know, and I think that when I fully, you know, grokked that, you know, that's a term from Robert Heinlein, you know, that when I fully like sunk into me, that was the experience that many African Americans were talking about, I felt like, oh my God, you know, like the America that I believed in never existed. Like that, meaning that it's always been a fiction. And I'm still struggling with that because I knew that, and I never fully believed. It's not like I was so naive that I believed the legend, you know, right, the mythic version of America. But somehow on a deep level, I still felt like, but like the principles that America is built on are aspirational. And that's why Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was so powerful, because he said, you know, I refuse to believe that America has written a bad check to its African-American citizens. You know, so I felt Martin Luther King, at least rhetorically, was so successful because he held up the founding principles of America and said, you're better than this, not you're terrible white people, you're better than this, I believe in you. And I think that I kind of internalized that and said, you know, I believe in the aspiration of America. And somehow this whole experience has made me feel like, you know, what I think a lot of the sort of more far left historian types like Howard Zinn have been saying forever, you know, that like it's all a lie, you know. So I'm really struggling with it. And you know,
I think it's great to take those sensations and ideas and bring them to the CEO, not for her or for him to find a solution, but to allow it to sort of inhabit you in a way that is more creative. The thing about depression, about despair and depression are usually not really what you're feeling. The despair and depression are interpretations. It's an internal interpretation that we say, and it has a lot to do with the feeling that something is repeating itself. Like, if you have a relationship that's not working, you're going to say, yeah, again, this happened. So you open up the news and again, Trump did something embarrassing, and again. And that's not true, because that's not how the world works. Usually what you're really feeling, what you want to feel, is pain. You're feeling pain. And pain, the really easy, that stuff really works. I mean, I'm not selling here anything, but you really feel like a small dose of joy when you feel that pain. Because the despair is a sort of lie that we tell to ourselves. Whereas if we'll feel this pain again and again, then the creative answer will come. I know it's possible that it'll be too late by then. Everything is possible. But that I think, for me, that's the way forward. And we don't have a lot of time. I think we have like 5 minutes. And there's one more thing that we wanted to cover, which is sort of a news you can use beat, which is something that nature can teach us about effective isolation, I guess, about social distancing done right. And that's a phenomenon that's called crown shyness. And it's when trees, look it up like in Wikipedia if that interests you. And it turns out that trees, some trees, many trees, actually sort of avoid touching each other. When the crown is like the top of the tree, and when you get to the top, the trees know how to sort of leave some space between them in order not to get infected. That's like the most accepted explanation for this. They don't want to trade infections. So they're really close and yet kind of afar. So I think, first of all, like, are the parks still open in Chicago?
Not really. I mean, they closed the entire lakefront because too many people were going to walk by the lake. So I think there are some parks that are open, but like the parks that are open are the ones that like nobody wants to go to, you know. So
Yeah.
Actually, my wife and I took a walk yesterday through this huge park. I actually took a picture because it was the kind of park that on a normal day, it was the first nice day we've had this year so far. You know, it's the first day that really felt like spring. And it would have been a day where the park was full of people playing frisbee and having picnics, and it was rush hour, and we took a picture. There was no one there and no cars, you know. But yeah, they've closed a lot of the parks.
So, like, hopefully, if you're lucky, you have some trees on your street even.
Yeah.
But actually, hugging a tree in a time where we're not allowed to hug each other, I know how that sounds. But it really works. I've done it like yesterday, and it's not that I've seen the cosmos or the heavens, but it felt really nice. I like put my head on it. So I would highly recommend that. And trees are, I think, just interesting biological creatures in the sense that they're very much alone, but at the same time, we're finding out in recent years that they communicate a lot and even cooperate with their own species. So if you're an introvert, and we're all introverts now by default, I think that's a good model to think about.
I think that maybe, I mean, first of all, I love that. You know, it's interesting. Like I've been thinking about, I mean, just on the level of hugging the tree, like it makes me realize like how much I appreciate that I have a dog, and that something that always wants to be hugged. And we were thinking about getting another dog, but we don't know where to get it because all the adoption places are closed. And anyway, but I think that something good maybe to talk about next week would be this question of, like you just said, I mean, you've said it in a number of ways, and I've been reflecting on it, that when should we start thinking about how we're going to behave when this is over? Because it will be over, whether it's in a month or a year, you know, it'll be over, and we'll have the opportunity to go back to our previous lives. Obviously, a lot will have changed because stores will be closed, restaurants might have closed, you know, all kinds of things will be, but it's more like going back to the world after some kind of, you know, disaster, natural disaster or something, and after that, people all try to go back and rebuild, you know, and that's the natural thing. And I'm really concerned in some ways about myself, but also I think a lot of others who actually have found some real benefit to this, whether it's the benefit of not having to get together with your family, you know, for the Seder, or other kinds of benefits, you know, and I feel like what's interesting is that there's a lot of supply that's meeting that demand right now, because all the suppliers, so to speak, are also forced to be here in this weird online landscape and everything. But as soon as it's over, I worry that all the sort of suppliers of experiences will go back to the old approach, and all those of us who already had the demand and were feeling that we weren't getting enough supply, and plus all the additional people that have been added to this midst, will not have a supply. So a lot of the people who actually are happy now, meaning not are happy, but are finding happiness now, it'll be taken away from them, and nobody will see that as a crisis because they're like, oh, I'll go back, you go back too. That's where we're supposed to be, you know? So I don't know. I'd like to reflect on that in a future show.
I think that's a great idea, and we'll do that. I'll just say, like, what comes to my mind is probably like the day after, it will seem like everything returned to normal. Everything returned to what it was. but that'll probably hide a deeper change underneath it. So I think that's it.
Yep. Our therapy
We're doing it
session is
every Thursday at this time, so we love for people to chime in, to come in, and that's it. Have a happy holiday.
Happy holiday, happy Passover.